All right, so here we go. Little me in the corner down here means there's text that we need to look at up at the top. So we're going to be taking a shot at our first textual thing that we're going to cover as a group, because the last 2.5 weeks have been about the plague, and that was something that about half of you read and half of you didn't. So a lot of you were playing way behind because you had no clue what we were talking about. So now hopefully we're off of that and we're all going to be on the same page. And if you're paying attention in class and doing the little bit of reading I give you on a nightly basis, not a nightly, on an occasional basis, then you should be in much better shape. So before we start trying to tackle the Seafarer, let's hit a couple of terms that you've never had, I'm sure, that you definitely need, okay? The first one's the term kenning, all right? These two things, actually, kennings and the other one's a caesura. Both of these are found quite frequently in Anglo-Saxon texts and, maybe some stuff around that time period. They are out of favor today for the most part, I would say. And it's because they have very specific purposes that we no longer need today. All right, so the first one, the kenning. Let's talk about it. A kenning is a very primitive form of imagery in which they basically use two words to describe one word. All right, so like Whale's home is the ocean. That's the most common one we talk about. All right. You're pretty weak, right? Yeah, but it's early forms of this. Okay, I mean, we're in a time period where writing is in its, I don't want to say its infancy, because writing has been around for a long time. Okay, but in this area, particularly, probably in its infancy with a lot of things. Now, also remember that most of this work, in fact, all of this work that we're going to study in this unit, was passed down orally. It was never written down until some Christian missionaries came around and decided to write this stuff down. And until then, it was all done orally. So you didn't need a paragraph describing a tree. I mean, some of you say we don't need that now. But the fact is that this was a memory device to help them memorize things, okay? Which is definitely what our second term was. It's caesura. This is a pause that comes in the middle of the book. So if you were to look in your textbook, the first one, the Seafarer, they're not as obvious. But if you go over to page 27 and you look at the way the Wanderer is set up on your page, you can see that weird pause in the middle. And what it was to break things up rhythmically. It was to memorize things. Think about how easy you guys can memorize lyrics for a song. And some of these are pretty extensive lyrics. You look at them when they're printed out and they're pretty long. If I gave you a poem of the same length, most of you couldn't do it. So understand the musical part of it is what really helps you remember things and memorize things. And so these were done that way. Initially, they would have been sung. They would have been musical sounding. They wouldn't have just been like what we're going to read. Because let me tell you something, the last thing y'all want to hear is me try to sing something. So we're not going to do that. So those two terms, kenning and caesura, are definitely something that we need to know about. Now, there is actually another term I want to go over for all three of these poems we're going to read leading up to Beowulf. And it isn't called an elegy. Now, usually in class when I ask what an elegy is, somebody says, oh, it's what you say at a funeral. That's a eulogy. But you're close, though, because a eulogy is designed as a way to kind of mourn a person who's died. An elegy is a poem that mourns the loss of something. So there is some similarity, all right? So that can help you remember it at least. But an elegy is really just a poem that is designed to mourn the loss of something. For all three of these poems we're going to look at, the Wanderer, the Seafarer, then next week we're going to do the Wanderer and the Wife's Lament. We're going to try to look at what is being mourned, what loss is being mourned in these, because they're all three elegies. Elegies are sad. They're typically gloomy. They seem to have a doom-like feel to them, which is right up my alley. I love this stuff, but I know a lot of you, it's just not your world. So, but that's okay. They've also got some hopeful messages in them too, which is kind of cool about them, okay? So, all right, if you want to follow with me on screen, you can. If you'd like to look at page 21 in your text, you can do that too. In class, we're going to look at that, all right? Now, this is the same translation, all right? As far as I can tell, they're both by Burton Raffel, who is, the translator for this time period. I think he's going to do the copy of Beowulf that we're going to look at too. So there's a lot of important things this guy's done. So the top there just gives you some basic background. You're welcome to look at that, but we're going to pick up where it starts with in red. Whoop, that doesn't move that. I forgot. Let me go to the internet. All right, now let's move it. All right, let's try it right there, okay? And I'll put it back on this. Nope, went too far, didn't we? It's hard to do this and have to switch between two windows, and they don't really line up properly. There we go. Let's just start there. All right. So, and I'm going to read it actually from my text because I've got my notes in my text and I need that crutch, okay? This tale is true in mine. It tells how the sea took me, swept me back and forth in sorrow and fear and pain, showed me suffering in 100 ships, in 1,000 ports, and in me. Well, right away, this does not sound like a pleasant poem, does it? I mean, right off the bat, we're going to look at suffering and what he learned about himself through the suffering. But hey, there's maybe the point of what we're doing. So anyway, we get right away that he's telling us this is what this story's about. It's about the sea. The poem's the Seafarer, so you probably got that already. It's about the sea swept him back and forth. So you get this feeling of helplessness, of how nature is bigger than you. Today, we take nature for granted until something major happens, like a hurricane or earthquake. But for most of us, it's just something we don't think about. Rain interrupts our day, but it interrupts our day at the beach or whatever. But in this time period, nature was a much bigger and scarier thing, especially if you're out on these rickety boats they had. All right, let's keep going. It says it tells of smashing surf when I sweated in the cold of an anxious watch. Perched in a bow as it dashed under cliffs, my feet were cast in icy bands, bound with frost. With frozen chains and hardship groaned about my heart. Hunger tore at my sea-weary soul. Ooh, all right, we had it right. This is definitely gloom and doom, right? The guy's talking about being on a boat. Now, I want you to understand, we are not on a boat in the Gulf of Mexico. We are on a boat in the North Sea, probably. All right, way up there where it's freezing, some of the most dangerous waters on the planet, to be honest with you. And it is freezing cold. The guy talks about as water pools up on the boat, his feet are freezing to the boards, okay? He's freezing cold. And he says he's sweating in the cold. I don't know if you've ever done that before. It is miserable to do that. So he's sweating in the cold. He's freezing to the boat. He's starving. So far, I mean, if I was to pitch this to you, if I'm trying to get you to take a job and tell you, hey, this is what you got to look forward to, none of you are signing up for sure. But wait until you learn more about this guy. Okay. He says, no man sheltered on the quiet fairness of earth can feel how wretched I was, drifting through winter on an ice-cold sea, whirled in sorrow, alone in a world blown clear of love, hung with icicles. The hailstorms flew. The only sound was the roaring sea, the freezing waves. The song of the swan might serve for pleasure. The cry of the seafowl, sorry, now I got to look a little different, might serve for the cry of the seafowl, the death noise of birds instead of laughter, the mewing of gulls instead of mead. Storms beat on the rocky cliffs and were echoed by icy feathered terns and the eagle's screams. No kinsman could offer comfort there to a soul left drowning in desolation. Whew. All right, I mean, that's a death metal song right there. Soul left drowning in desolation. That is a powerful thing. By the way, apologies for messing up the reading. I don't have my glasses, and all of a sudden the lines start running together for me. I'm doing a good job to do as well as I have at this point. Getting old is miserable. I should write a poem about it. Anyway, so what we have here is a lot of bird imagery. So what does that have to do with anything? Well, that means he's close to land, at least for the most part. So the guy's dealing with around the edges of England. These guys wouldn't go very far. The boats just weren't up for it. But he's like, this is what I have. I don't have the sound of the mead hall. And again, we're going to talk a lot more about this in Beowulf, but the mead hall was the central part of these towns. This is where everyone would kind of be together. It was a big, it was this, your town was your family. I mean that literally. They would all pal together. Most of them were related, and you'd be in this big area and you would eat together, especially if you were one of the more important people in town. And it was for protection mainly. I mean, you got to think about how often these people were raided by neighboring villages. So we take for granted how safe our world is today, or not our world, back up. Our communities, okay, here, our world is not safe, but our communities, are safe. We don't go to bed fearing to be attacked usually, and that's what they would do. So being together made that a lot easier to deal with. So we get the sound of the death noise of birds is what he gets instead of the laughter of the mead hall. So this guy is feeling lonely. Remember when we talked about that was a common element of how the nature, the location fit this place? England's an island. It's a cold, lonely island. And so the people that are write about being cold. They write about being lonely. It's because that's what dominated their life. So we're seeing that here. And like I said, and this is our first sign of what he's kind of upset about. He says no kinsman could offer comfort there to a soul left drowning in desolation. So for some reason, he's saying that no one can make none of his family. Kinsman is a word tied to this time period. And he says none of them can make him feel better. All right, let me move up our poem a little bit. All right, let's go from here. It says, and who could believe, knowing but the passion of cities, swelled proud with wine, and no taste of misfortune, how often, how wearily I put myself back on the paths of the sea. Night would blacken, it would snow from the north, frost bound the earth, and hail would fall. the coldest seas, and how my heart would begin to beat, knowing once more the salt waves tossing in this towering sea. The time for journeys would come over my soul, called me eagerly out, sent me over the horizon, seeking foreigners' homes. All right, this part is where we get a bit of a twist. And if you're struggling with poetry, poetry is really about finding where the turns are and then figuring out, okay, what kind of blanket, what happens here? Okay, here there's a turn here, what happens here, and so on. So the guy is freezing cold and is miserable out there on the ocean. That's part one. Now, as we switch to the second part, he's talking about the cities. He's about it sounds like when he's at home, and he doesn't have a lot of good to say about the cities. Look at the wording. Who could believe, knowing but the passion of cities swelled proud with wine and no taste of misfortune? So he gets to the cities and he realizes, man, these people are soft and they don't realize what real problems are. You think about how you would feel if you've been through real problems and you're sitting at the table right now listening to your friend talk about getting their cell phone taken away for a week. I mean, you just want to smack them when they do that, all right? Or I do. Maybe I just want to smack people. The fact is that he's pointing out that when he gets back, as much as he hates the sea, when he gets to the cities, he spends time there and realizes how garbage the people are. And what happens? He wants to go right back out to the ocean, knowing what's waiting him, and he wants to be back out there. He says, he talks about hail. He calls it the coldest seeds. There's you a kenning, by the way. Cold seeds would be like would hail, and you can see how it fits. Imagery like this is very literal. Okay. All right, let's pick up. I've still got us on there. Yeah. He says, but there isn't a man on earth so proud, so born to greatness, so bold with his youth, grown so brave or so graced by God that he feels no fear as the sails unfurl, wondering what fate has willed and will do. All right, so now he's talking about, and I'm going to go ahead and move this up while I'm talking. Now he's talking about how there's not a man alive who doesn't, feel a little bit of tension and fear as they go out on the sea, not knowing what's going to happen to you, what fate has planned for you, which, by the way, that can apply to every day, whether you live in Anglo-Saxon England or whether you're in 2020 Mobile. We don't know day to day what's coming for us. Now, you notice we got our first mention of God in there. So remember, when this poem was originally told, we don't have a date on it. We don't know. But it was before the missionaries got there. So when they wrote it down, they would add in little bits like this, okay? It's not out of the way here. It fits just fine. So no worries about it. So let's keep going. He said, no harps ring in his heart, no rewards, no passion for women, no worldly pleasures, nothing but the ocean's heave. But longing wraps itself around him. Orchards blossom, the towns bloom, fields grow lovely as the world springs fresh. So he's talking, now you're getting a little change in the mood here as they're talking about pretty imagery, all right, which we've had really cold and dark and gloomy stuff. Now we've got a little bit of difference here. But he's talking about how much he longs to be back out on the ocean despite all the negatives that come with it. That's his home. Now, my college prep class, you're going to do a project about the concept of, or I think it's you guys are doing a thing about home. It may be the honors class, to be honest with you. I just got done doing this. You'd think my memory would work better, right? But one of you is doing a project dealing with the concept of home, what the Anglo-Saxons feel it is and what we feel it is today. And for them, home is where you feel happy. For some people, it might be the mead hall. For some people, it might be that pasture watching over their flock. But for this guy, it's the ocean. And no matter what garbage comes with it, he loves being there. All right, he says, fields grow lovely as the world springs fresh. And all these admonish that willing mind, leaping to journeys, always set in thoughts traveling on a quickening tide. So summer's sentinel, the cuckoo, sings in his murmuring voice, and our hearts mourn as he urges, who can understand in ignorant ease what we others suffer as the paths of exile stretch endlessly on? So we got more bird imagery there. Did you catch that? Now we got a cuckoo who's singing, and there's a message here that comes out. And this is where we get to what this elegy is about. Let's look at these words again. Who could understand in ignorant ease what we others suffer as the paths of exile stretch endlessly on? So what's happened to this guy? Well, he's been exiled. He doesn't have his own home that he can go back to. His exiles it could have been because he did something wrong and they kicked him out, but more than likely it's because that home doesn't exist anymore. These villages were very fluid. You'd have this place that you lived, and then the neighboring village would come over and attack it, and let's just call it what it is. They would take the young women that they wanted to keep with them. They might kill all the men. If there were babies, they might take them and make them part of their family. Now they've kind of assimilated this group, and they're going to do their thing until another group comes and does the same thing. And this was their life. It was terrifying and really unstable. So he's been exiled, and it could be because of being kicked out, or it could be because his the former place he used to live was destroyed, maybe while he was out on a boat or something. Some people raided it and destroyed it. But he's saying none of these people who have a home can realize the pain I'm going through. So we're getting a mourning for the loss of his home. All right. That's really what he's sad about. Now, there's going to be a couple of other things. I think it's in this poem they're elegized, but that one right there is, I think, the big one. Okay. He says, and yet my heart wanders away, my soul roams with the sea. The whale's home, wandering to the widest corners of the world, returning ravenous with desire, flying solitary, screaming, exciting me to the open ocean, breaking oaths on the curves of a wave. So there you got the whale's home that everyone knows about. Let's see, where are we on this? It may have already passed you. No, there it is, whale's home. I see it right there at line 60. So let's go ahead and move this up, and then we're going to talk about it. We've got past whale's home. Let's go right there. We're getting there, guys. It's a longer poem, longest of the three, but we're going to get through it. All right, so now we have this guy talking about, how much he desires to be back out on the ocean. Now look at the wording there in that ravenous with desire, exciting to the open ocean, curve of a wave, and then compare it to the stuff we saw at the beginning about, how cold and miserable it was. So obviously this guy has kind of he loves the ocean, but yet it still causes him pain. Now, there you go. That guy understands life, because there's so many of the things that we love in our life that still are painful for us to deal with. I love my job, but there's days it takes everything I've got and some to get through it. You love your families, but sometimes they can push you to the edge and cause you pain. But, the good outweighs the bad. And, this is the place I feel at home. So for like me, my classroom is a place I feel at home. For this guy, the ocean was where he felt at home. Does that mean that there are always good times? No, not at all. But it means that you still feel drawn back to these places, okay? Because it's where you belong. Take this from a Christian perspective. It's what you've been called to do. Everything is not a calling to be a missionary or to be a preacher. You can be called to be anything, whether it's a sailor or a teacher. Those are still callings, okay? All right. But now, speaking of religious things, the missionary or the priest or whoever it was that sat down and wrote this, a monk, got a hold of the pen and decided to go off a little. It says, thus the joys of God are fervent with life, where life itself fades quickly into the earth. The wealth of the world neither reaches to heaven nor remains. No man has ever faced the dawn, certain which of fate's three threats would fall, illness or age or an enemy's sword, snatching the life from his soul. The praise the living pour on the dead, flowers from reputation, plant an earthly life of profit, reaped even from hatred and rancor, of bravery flung in the devil's face, and death can only bring you to earthly praise and a song to celebrate a place with the angels, life eternally blessed in the hosts of heaven. Well, a little bit heavy-handed there, but you do see the religious angle they took on this. The problem, in my opinion, here, which we didn't see earlier, is it's too heavy. If you're going to take this pagan thing, which there's a lot of that element in here, and you're going to turn it into a Christian when you've got to set it up right, and by just all of a sudden throwing in this whole seemingly separate paragraph that's mixed with things like an earthly life of profit reaped even from hatred and rancor of bravery flung in the devil's face, and here we go, this part, death can only bring you earthly praise and a song to celebrate. Probably that and a song to celebrate was not part of the original poem. That's a guess. But it feels out of place. It's contrary to what he just said. So this was the problem with these. Now, does that mean that it's not worth studying? Of course not. And I'm a Christian, so I'm fine with the things it says personally. But the integrity of the text has definitely been monkeyed with a little bit, okay? But, I mean, it still adds to the point the guy's making. I have a hard time believing whether this initially had a feeling of hope, which there is at the end of this. I don't know if that was originally the thing that he was dealing with. But, we don't know. It doesn't matter. What we have is this, and this does have some hope. So let's get to it and find out what it is. All right? So we do get this image of, and I do love the part in the middle there about, we don't know which of fate's three swords will fall. He talks about illness, age, or an enemy. So, the three ways you could die at that time period, really, and the ways that we could still die today. Now, switch up the wording a little bit. Illness is still a big deal, obviously. Age, that gets us all the time. An enemy's sword, obviously, that one's probably not a thing. But, you still have, any kind of violence out there, and there's plenty of it that could do you in. So there's a ton of different ways we could be injured on a day-to-day basis. And he tells you that all of the things you've done and you've stored up on this life, it's stuff thrown on an empty thrown on a tomb at the end, because, to be honest with you, that stuff can't go with you. Then he mentions a little bit about heaven there at the end. about, living the right kind of life gives you a place to celebrate with the angels, okay? Now, here's another thing he's elegizing. Let's see, let me go ahead and pull this up a little bit. Told you it's kind of a long poem, right? And the video's gotten long, so nobody's going to watch it, I'm guessing. But hey, those of you at home, enjoy. All right. He says, the days are gone when the kingdoms of earth flourished in glory. Now there are no rulers, no emperors, no givers of gold as once there were, when wonderful things were worked among them, and they lived in lordly magnificence. Those powers have vanished, those pleasures are dead. The weakest survives, and the world continues, kept spinning by toil. By the way, my favorite part of the poem is right there. All right, I get this. I feel this as I'm getting older. I definitely feel this. This guy's saying the world isn't what it used to be. It's weak. It's soft. All the tough guys are gone. All the good leaders are gone. Everybody that meant something to me is gone. And you know what? This place is just, it's got the bad people still running. And by bad people, he doesn't mean like villains. He means just the weak, the soft. And he says that's what's left. This culture was a very tough culture where, that wouldn't be okay. Now, I know our world is different today. You don't want to go around calling people soft and wimps because that makes you look kind of like, Mr. Toxic Masculinity. And that's not what we're trying to do. But that being said, he is definitely saying he misses the way the world used to be. There's a second thing he's elegizing or mourning. He misses his kin, he misses his town where he used to be, but he also misses the way the world in general used to be. And he says it's just kept spinning by toil. Toil is hard work. All right. Look at this next line. All glory is tarnished. The world's honor ages and shrinks, bent like the men who mold it. Man, he does not like the world the way it is. This guy has some definite concern about how things are going. All right, I love that line though. When he says, "All glory is tarnished, the world's honor ages and shrinks like the men who mold it, like the old men who mold it." All right, that's what he's basically saying. He's saying the world just it's not something to be proud of. Again, this was written back in Anglo-Saxon times. Put this guy in 2020 and see what he thinks. Goodness, I don't know if he could write a poem about how disappointed he is. Their faces blanch as time advances. Their beards wither and they mourn the memory of friends. The sons of princes sown in the dust. The soul stripped of its flesh knows nothing of sweetness or sour, feels no pain, bends neither its hand nor its brain. A brother opens his palms and pours down gold on his kinsman's grave, strewing his coffin with treasures intended for heaven, but nothing golden shakes the wrath of God for a soul overflowing with sin, and nothing hidden on earth rises to heaven. Oh, the monk got going again there, didn't he? It's like, they're talking about the loss of all these great things, and then it talks about a kinsman throwing gold on his, dead brother's casket, and then all of a sudden we get into but that gold is intended for heaven, which, come on, that line I got a problem with. But then he says that, nothing can help you escape your sin. And he's getting the repent part in there, which that part's fine. But the gold is all intended for heaven is a tad bit on the greedy side as far as I'm concerned. But you didn't come here for that. So let's keep going. All right. So let's move this up a little bit. We're right here at the bottom. So, all right, let's get this little bit. I'm going to have to move it. Nope, that should get us through. All right. So back to the video. This is the rest of it right here on screen, okay? Because we all fear God. He turns the earth. He set it swinging firmly in space, gave life to the world and light to the sky. Death leaps at the fools who forget their God. He who lives humbly has angels from heaven to carry his courage and strength and belief. A man must, now, by the way, I have a big dash in my, or slash marker in my book because I feel like that part right there, starting with the "we all fear God" up here, is obviously the monk still writing, okay? But then he doesn't transition out right when this ends, and it says a man must conquer pride. All of a sudden, I think we're back with the original again. It says a man must conquer pride, not kill it. Be firm with his fellows. Chase for himself. Treat all the world as the world deserves. Now that doesn't seem like Christian theology, does it? With love or with hate, but never with harm. Though an enemy seek to scorch him in hell or set the flames of a funeral pyre under his Lord. Now, that definitely is the pagan guy speaking again. The idea that you treat the world as it deserves, which is not Christian at all. And then saying with love or hate. So he's saying hate them if you want, but never with harm, which, that part makes me wonder if that's not been added too, because I feel like these ancient people had no problem harming people. By the way, neither do we, sadly. Then he says, fate is stronger and God mightier than any man's mind. Now we're back to the monk again. and God mightier than any man's mind. Our thoughts should turn to where our home is, consider the ways of coming there, then strive for sure permission for us to rise to that eternal joy. Now, before you read these last few lines, what's he talking about? Yeah, I'm asking, no one's in here. Think about it for a second. When he says our thoughts should turn to where our home is. Now, this was where they could be kind of clever. This could have been part of the original, all right? The guy, we talked about what home was to them earlier, but what's he talking about if this is the monk writing? He's talking about heaven, okay? That's good. That's how you're supposed to do this. Take it and kind of naturally build it into the poem, not these abrupt stops that we saw that really just, don't stick to the tone that we've been set. All right. I guess he didn't take English class at Cottage Hill because we would have told him that's not how you do it. All right. Last few lines. He says, that life born in the love of God and the hope of heaven, praise the holy grace of him who honored us, eternal, unchanging creator of earth. Amen. And that feels like the ending to a prayer. So it does end with some hope. The hope is that endure the stuff you're dealing with here. Keep your eyes set towards heaven, and you have something to look forward to. And this was a common thing when these missionaries would come to these really violent areas, is to tell them that because it would give them something to realize. Okay, I've got something to look forward to, and that bit of hope is what converted people and kept a lot of them faithful, which is, I think, is a good thing. Nothing wrong with some hope. Now, I do want to point out as we close this that I'm not being critical of the Christian influence on this. I'm being critical of the writing. Okay, I feel like the way the monk abruptly inserts things really causes some detriment, is detrimental to the overall tone of this poem. I think he could have done it a lot smoother way. I think it's good that he has it. I just don't think he did it well. All right. So I'm criticizing him, not the theology. Trust me, that's not where my heart is. But so with this, what do we find out about these people? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in class. All right. We're going to talk about, or we should have talked about, what this tells us about these people of this time period and how they felt about things and what they valued. All right. Because our big thing throughout these three poems and Beowulf is to look at what heroes are, what villains are, and what traits they share, and what that teaches us about these people. And by the way, that's one of our things here is the power of language. Remember, that's our unit. That's not just our unit title. That's our whole year is revolving around that. And this first one's about the power of language to define our heroes and villains and how they did it back then, and then again how we do it today too. So, and we're going to talk more about the modern relevance at a later date. But I'm at 27 and a half minutes right now, which is way too long for a video because I know how you guys feel about that. So I'm going to stop here. If you have any questions about this poem, there's two ways you can deal with it, all right? One, you can do the traditional email me and ask me questions about it. I'd love to get those emails because I don't get any. All right. The second one, and I'm not trying to be a YouTuber, is to put a comment down there. Now, they won't appear right away. I have to approve them because I had some guy say something awful on one of my former videos, and thank God I caught it before any of you saw it, and I was able to delete it. It was an advertisement, and I was able to grab that and get it out of there. So I'm approving all comments from now on, but if it's from you guys, I'm going to approve it. And then, if there's something else you got from it, we can have a conversation in there. A lot of you won't talk in class, so this is a great place to do it, and it makes me feel better about making these because as much as I love making them, I don't think people love watching them, judging by my analytics page, which is okay. I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it so that, one or two of you at home doesn't feel left out. But, I'd love for the rest of you to get something out of it too, because I guarantee you what I taught in class probably isn't the exact same as what I taught here. So anyway, I hope that you guys maybe enjoyed this a little bit. It's not the plague, so it's something a little different. I mean, it's still pretty dark. I get that. But I think it was good. So I love this poem. I think it's got a great message. I think that the imagery in it's beautiful. And I love to see where we came from. And this is where a lot of us, the writing tradition begins. All right. Okay, guys, we're going to end here. And this would have been our Friday work. So I'm going to pretend like it's Friday when you watch this and tell you have a great weekend. Okay. All right. Talk to you guys later.